In this tutorial, I am going to show you how to make these round Tunisian Simple Stitch dish scrubbies, and we are going to be making these dish scrubbies using the Tunisian Simple Stitch. You can use a Tunisian crochet hook to make these, but the good news is you do not have to use a Tunisian crochet hook to make these dish scrubbies. You can use a regular crochet hook to make these, since these are not going to have that many stitches, and they will definitely fit on a regular crochet hook. So if you have never done any Tunisian crochet before and you want to try to make these dish scrubbies, you don't have to buy any special crochet hooks to try to learn how to do this dish scrubby today. Now, if you are new to Tunisian crochet, I do have a tutorial for beginners of how to do the Tunisian Simple Stitch. So if you want to watch that tutorial first, I'll leave an iCard in the corner that you can click on that will bring you directly to that tutorial on how to do the Tunisian Simple Stitch. And that one goes into great detail of how to do the Tunisian Simple Stitch. I will also leave a link in the description box below that will bring you directly to that tutorial if you want to watch how to do the Tunisian Simple Stitch before you go ahead and make this dish scrubby. And then after you watch that tutorial, I feel that you'll have no problem making this dish scrubby, and it's very easy to do if you know how to do the Tunisian Simple Stitch. To make this Tunisian dish scrubby, we work with short rows, and the short rows is what makes it become round. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started, and I will show you how to make these round Tunisian dish scrubbies. Okay, so to make the round Tunisian dish scrubby, I'm going to be using this spool of tulle. It is 6 inches wide, and this spool has 25 yards. And the size crochet hook that I'm going to use is a size K, 10.5, 5.50 millimeter crochet hook. And I'm actually not going to cut the tulle in half here. I'm going to use the whole width of the tulle when I make this dish scrubby. Okay, so like I said, we're just going to use the whole width of the tulle. It's 6 inches wide. I'm just going to kind of crunch it up here to work with it as I crochet. Okay, and we're going to start off with a magic ring. So what you're going to do is you do want to leave a good sized tail for the magic ring, because when we're done, we're going to use the tail from the magic ring to weave up to connect the two edges together. You're going to have, like, this part is not going to be connected together, and I'll show you what I mean when we get there. So we're going to need to seam the two rows together, and we want to leave a good sized tail because we'll need it to weave in at the end. And we're going to start from the magic ring and weave up. And the reason why we're going to do that is because after we make this scrubby, the part where we end here, rather than using that to weave the seam it together, when we finish, we're not going to use the tail that's at the top, because we're going to need that to complete a round to do the edges. So that's why we want to leave a good sized tail when we do the magic ring, so that we can seam the two edges together. Okay, so we're going to make our magic ring. So to do a magic ring, you just go ahead and wrap that tulle around the top of your fingers until it makes like a little X mark. And then you're going to take your crochet hook, point it down towards your fingers, and you're going to insert it underneath this strand here. Okay, and then grab the one in front of it and pull it underneath, and then you just twist your crochet hook up until it's sitting on top of that X mark, and then you insert it underneath this strand here. Pull that through that loop, and that is your magic ring. So you can see I did leave a good sized tail to leave so we can weave it in to seam the two edges together when we're done. So what we're going to do is we're going to do Tunisian crochet in using short rows. By doing short rows, that is what's going to make this become a circle. So I'll show you what I mean. So to begin, we're going to chain 5 chains. And you want to work these fairly loose, but with the same tension. Okay, so I did 5 chains, and then what we're going to do is we're going to turn the chain over And you'll see you have those little back bumps for the spine of the chain. We're going to insert our hook underneath those back bumps to pull up a loop. You skip the first one that's closest to the hook, and then you find your next back bump here, and you insert your hook underneath it, pull over, and then pull that through to pull up a loop, and then you leave the loop on the hook. And then you find your next back bump, insert your hook underneath it, yarn over, or sorry, tulle over, and pull that through and pull up a loop and leave the loop on your hook. Then you find the next back bump, insert your hook underneath it, tulle over, pull up a loop, and leave the loop on the hook. Then you have one more, because the one here, that's that first part when we made the magic ring. We don't count that one. So the next back bump here, and then insert your hook underneath the next back bump of the chain, tulle over, pull that through to pull up a loop. So now you will have 5 loops on your hook. And then with our magic ring, we are going to work over the tail. We work around the magic ring. We're going to wrap this tail around it, and we're going to work over that too. So now, then after you pull up the 5 loops, you're going to insert your hook into the magic ring, pull up a loop, and now you'll see that after you inserted your hook into the magic ring and pulled up a loop, you should have 6 loops on your hook for this forward pass. And then you are going to yarn over, or then you're going to tulle over, and you're going to pull through 2 loops at a time until you have 1 loop remaining on your hook. So we're yarning over and pulling through 2 loops, yarn or tulle over, pull through 2 loops, tulle over and pull through 2 loops until you have 1 loop remaining on your hook. Now, when you do Tunisian crochet, normally when you do your return pass, you would pull through just 1 loop to begin and then pull through 2, but since we are working into a magic ring, we started off with pulling through 2 loops at a time from the beginning of the return pass. Okay, so now the next forward pass, we're going to do a short row. We're going to be working under the vertical bars to do Tunisian simple stitches. So this strand right here, this vertical bar. So this vertical bar that's on the edge, we do not work into that stitch. That's in line with this one, and that counts as the first stitch. So we do not work into that first stitch for the edge on the right side. So now what you're going to do is you're going to find your first vertical bar, which is right here. You're going to insert your hook underneath the vertical bar, tulle over, and pull up a loop, and leave the loop on the hook. So that's the first one. Find your next vertical bar, insert your hook underneath it, tulle over, pull up a loop, and then we have 2 more stitches here before the magic ring. So we're going to insert a hook underneath the next vertical bar, tulle over, and pull up a loop. We now have 4 loops on our hook. There's 1 more vertical bar here, but we're working a short row, so we're going to stop short of finishing the row. So once you have 4 loops and you have 1 left, you know that you're done now, because you do not work that last one. Because we are going to now go ahead, because this is a short row, so now we're going to do our return pass. Okay, and then we're going to tulle over and pull through 2 loops at a time for our return pass. Yeah, tulle over and pull through 2. Now we have 1 loop on our hook. We've completed the return pass. So now we're going to work a forward pass. So when we work a forward pass after doing a short row, what we're going to do is we're going to insert a hook into this first vertical bar, pull up a loop, and do a Tunisian simple stitch, and leave the loop on the hook. Find your next vertical bar, insert your hook underneath it, pull up a loop. We now have 3 loops on our hook. So now remember, this was a short row, so if you look at the stitch, it's down here from the previous row. So you're going to insert your hook down here to that vertical bar that's in the previous row. Insert your hook into it, tool over, and pull up a loop. You have one more stitch. You're going to insert your hook underneath that vertical bar, pull up a loop, and leave the loop on the hook. So you have 5 loops. So then you're going to insert your hook into the center of the magic ring, pull up a loop, and after you insert your hook into the magic ring and pull up a loop, you'll have 6 loops on your hook. So now we're going to do the return pass. To do the return pass, we're going to tool over, and we're not just going to pull through one to begin like you would normally do when you're working with Tunisian crochet. Normally when you're doing Tunisian simple stitches and you're working on a project, normally to do your return pass, you would tool over and just pull through one loop to begin and then work through 2 loops at a time. But since we're working into a magic ring, we are not going to just work through one loop to begin for the return pass. We're going to yarn. So for the return pass, we're going to tool over and pull through 2 loops at a time until we have 1 loop remaining on our hook. Okay, and that completes the return pass. Now we're going to do a forward pass, and this forward pass is going to be a short row. So we're going to insert our hook underneath. Remember, we don't work into the first vertical bar on the edge here. We find the next vertical bar, insert our hook underneath it, tool over, pull that tool over underneath that vertical bar, and then leave your loop on the hook. Find the next vertical bar, insert your hook underneath it, pull up a loop, and leave the loop on the hook. And now we have 2 more vertical bars, but remember this is a short row, so we're going to stop short of the last stitch. So underneath the vertical bar, insert your hook underneath it, tool over, pull that through, and leave the loop on the hook. So now we're stopping short of finishing this row, so we're not going to work that stitch. And now we're going to go ahead and do our return pass. So we're going to tool over and pull through 2 loops at a time until there's 1 loop remaining on our hook. Okay, so we've completed our return pass for this short row. So now we're going to go ahead and do a forward pass. So now remember, we don't work into that first one. Insert your hook underneath the first vertical bar, tool over, pull that through to complete your Tunisian simple stitch, and leave the loop on the hook. And then insert your hook underneath the next vertical bar, tool over, pull underneath that vertical bar, and that completes your Tunisian simple stitch, and then leave that loop on the hook. Now here, this was a short row, so now what you're going to do, we now have 3 loops on our hook. So down, we're going to actually insert a hook down to this row and grab that stitch there. Because if you look at it, you can see kind of slants off, it drops off. That's because that's not a vertical bar. This is the vertical bar down here because we did a return pass with a short row. So now we pick up that vertical bar that's in the previous row, insert a hook underneath it, tool over, pull the tool over underneath the vertical bar, pull up a loop to complete your Tunisian simple stitch, and leave the loop on the hook. So now we have 4 loops. We have another loop here to work. That's actually a vertical bar here. We have 1 more vertical bar to work before we work into the magic ring. So that's actually from the previous row, because when you do a forward pass, when you're working in a short row, when you do the forward pass after you did a short row, you're dropping down to this longer stitch here that's in the previous row, and then there's 1 more stitch to work. So we insert our hook into the vertical bar, yarn over, tool over, pull up a loop. We now have 5 loops on our hook, and then we're going to insert our hook into the center of the magic ring and pull up a loop. So now at this point you should have 6 loops on your hook. So now we're going to do a return pass. We're going to tool over and pull through 2 loops at a time until we have 1 loop remaining on our hook. So you can see now that it's starting to curve, and that's how we're going to get a circle. It's going to continue to curve around this magic ring to create the circle. So now we're going to do another forward pass, and this forward pass is going to be a short row. So insert your hook underneath this first vertical bar, tool over, pull up a loop, insert your hook underneath the next vertical bar, pull up a loop, and then insert your hook underneath the next vertical bar, pull up a loop. So we now have 4 loops on our hook. So we're not going to work that last vertical bar because we're doing a short row. So we're stopping short of finishing this row. And then we're going to do a return pass now. Tool over and pull through 2 loops at a time until you have 1 loop remaining on your hook. So you can see what we're doing here. We alternate between doing a full row, and then we work a short row, then a full row, a short row, a full one, and a short row. And we continue that all the way around. So we just did a return pass. That was a short row. So now we need to do our forward pass. Insert your hook into the first vertical bar. And when I say the first vertical bar, I don't mean the one that's on the edge, because we're not working into the first vertical bar, which is the edge. So when I say work, the first vertical bar, I mean this one that's next to the one on the edge. Go ahead and insert the hook underneath the vertical bar, tool over and pull up a loop. Find your next vertical bar, pull up a loop, and then remember we're working a short row. So if you look, your next vertical bar is down here in the previous row. And you can kind of tell if you look at it. You see how that stitch is just kind of elongated? Because you can see how this last, after the vertical bar, it kind of drops down here. And then you can see your elongated vertical bar in the previous row. That's where you're inserting your hook, underneath that vertical bar. Tool over, pull up a loop, and then find the next vertical bar, which is actually in the previous row, after that elongated stitch there. Insert your hook underneath this vertical bar, tool over and pull up a loop. So you should see you have 5 loops now. Insert your hook into the center of the magic ring. And of course, we're working around the tail of the magic ring as well. So insert your hook into the center of the magic ring, tool over and pull up a loop. So after you inserted your hook into the magic ring and pulled up a loop, you should have 6 loops on your hook. So now what we're going to do, we're going to tool over, pull through 2 loops, tool over, pull through 2, tool over, pull through 2. So for this return pass, we're pulling through 2 loops at a time until we have 1 loop remaining on our hook. So you can see how it's starting to curve now. That's going to continue to work its way around that magic ring to create our circle. Okay, this is a complete row where we didn't stop short. So now we're going to work another forward pass, and this forward pass is going to be a short row. So we're going to insert our hook underneath the first vertical bar, tool over and pull up a loop. Insert your hook underneath the next vertical bar, tool over, pull up a loop, and leave it on the hook. And then you see there's 2 more stitches. We're just going to work the next one because we're stopping short of finishing the row. So next one, find your next vertical bar, insert your hook underneath it, tool over, pull that underneath that vertical bar to pull up a loop. So now you see you have 4 loops on your hook. There's 1 more vertical bar, but remember we're not going to work underneath that vertical bar because we're stopping short of finishing that last stitch. So now what we want to do is we want to do a return pass. So we're going to tool over, pull through 2 loops, tool over, pull through 2, tool over, pull through 2. So that completes the short row. Okay, so now let's go ahead and do a forward pass. So when you have a short row, you can see here's the 2 vertical bars, and then this last vertical bar is down in the previous row, and then you work this stitch and then into the magic ring. So let's go ahead and start our forward pass. So find the first vertical bar after the edge stitch. Insert your hook underneath the vertical bar, tool over, pull up a loop, find your next vertical bar, tool over, pull up a loop. So now we have 3 loops on our hook. After you have 3 loops on your hook, you now know to look for that elongated stitch that's that vertical bar from the previous row. Because if you look at it, you can see it, the stitch kind of just, the row kind of just drops off here. And then right there is when you'll find your vertical bar. So insert your hook into that vertical bar down there in the previous row. Tool over, pull up a loop. And then you have 1 more vertical bar to work. Insert your hook underneath it. Tool over, pull up a loop. You should have 5 loops on your hook. Insert your hook into the center of the magic ring. Pull up a loop. And then you'll have 6 loops on your hook. And then what we're going to do here, we're going to tool over and pull through 2 loops at a time until you have 1 loop remaining on your hook. Okay, so that's what it looks like so far, and you can see it's starting to really curve around now. And you're going to keep doing that. You're going to end up with 23 rows. What you're going to end up having is, if you look at this work right now, you may be able to see where the short rows are. Let me see if I can kind of point it out to you. So you can see these are the short rows right here. You can kind of see where they end here, and then here's the full row. Then here's your short row, here's a full row, here's a short row, a full row, a short row, full, short, full. So we're alternating between a full, short, and you do that all the way around. Now, this was a full row. So now we know the next row is going to be a short row. So hopefully that was helpful in trying to recognize the difference between the rows. Okay, so now for this short row, we're going to go ahead and find the first vertical bar. So we're going to find the first vertical bar, insert our hook underneath it, tool over, pull up a loop, insert our hook underneath the next vertical bar, pull up a loop, and then we'll have 3 loops on our hook. Okay, and then we find the next vertical bar, insert our hook underneath it, tool over and pull up a loop. So now we have 4 loops on our hook. So when we did the full rows, we worked each vertical bar and then we inserted it into the magic ring and pulled up a loop. So when we complete the regular row, the full row, we have 6 loops on our hook. Then we do our return pass. For the short rows, we're going to have 4 loops on our hook, and then we'll do the return pass. So we have our 4 loops, tool over, pull through 2 loops at a time until you have 1 loop remaining on your hook. And that completes the return pass for our short row. So if you look at it now, you should really see how, if you look at it, you can compare this now. See where this ends here? So you can see this short row ends there. These are the short rows. So hopefully you can see that, because like I said, if you envision a V, then you can see where it stops. Okay, so now we're going to do a forward pass. So we're going to insert a hook underneath the first vertical bar, tool over and pull up a loop. Find your next vertical bar, tool over, pull up a loop. Now the next vertical bar is actually going to be in the previous row, so it drops down here. So you insert your hook underneath that vertical bar, tool over, pull up a loop, and then work underneath the next vertical bar, pull up a loop, and then you're going to insert your hook into the center of the magic ring, tool over and pull up a loop. So now you'll have 6 loops on your hook. Okay, and then we're going to tool over and pull through 2 loops at a time until we have 1 loop remaining on our hook. You can count your rows by very easily with the Tunisian Simple Stitches. If you look, here's the edge of your work, and you can see these nice V stitches along the edge, so it makes it very, very easy to count your rows. You just count each V stitch. So far I've done 11 rows, because we're going to need to do 23 rows for our dish scrubby. In each row in Tunisian crochet, you need a forward pass and a return pass for each row. So each V stitch is one row. So now we're going to do a forward pass, and this forward pass is going to be a short row. So you hook underneath this first vertical bar. Remember, we're not working into the edge, so when I say first vertical bar, you're skipping this first vertical bar that's along the edge and working into the next one. So I've inserted my hook underneath the vertical bar. I'm going to tool over and pull up a loop. Find the next vertical bar, insert your hook underneath it. Tool over, pull up a loop. Find your next vertical bar, insert your hook underneath it, pull up a loop, and we're going to stop there. We have 4 loops on our hook. We're going to stop there and stop short of finishing the row. We're not going to do that last stitch. Now we're going to do our return pass. Tool over, pull through 2 loops, tool over, pull through 2, and pull through 2. And that completes our return pass. So that was a short row. So when we do this forward pass, we're going to pick up 5 loops and then work into the magic ring and pick up another loop. So when you finish this forward pass, we'll have 6 loops on our hook. When we do the forward pass for the short rows, we have 4 loops on our hook, then we do the return pass. When we do the forward pass for the full row, because we're working into the magic ring and pulling up loop, we'll have 6 loops on our hook, then we'll do the return pass. We're going to go ahead and do a forward pass. We're going to be picking up 6 loops since we're picking one up from the magic ring as well. So now insert your hook underneath this vertical bar here, tool over, pull up a loop, find your next vertical bar, insert your hook underneath it, tool over and pull up a loop. So now we have 3 loops on our hook. So after you have the 3 loops on your hook, you know that the next vertical bar is going to be in the previous row. Drops down here. So go ahead and insert your hook underneath that vertical bar. Tool over and pull up a loop. We have 4 loops now. Insert your hook underneath the next vertical bar, which is the vertical bar just before the magic ring. Tool over, pull up a loop, and then insert your hook into the magic ring, and then pull up a loop. We now have 6 loops on our hook. So we're going to tool over and pull through 2 loops at a time until we have 1 loop remaining on our hook. So that's what it looks like so far. So now the next row will be a short row. So this forward pass, we're going to pick up 4 loops. We already have 1 loop on the hook, so we're going to pick up 3 more loops. So since we already have this 1 loop, we're going to insert our hook underneath the next 3 vertical bars and pull up a loop, and then we'll have 4 loops on our hook. Insert your hook underneath this vertical bar, tool over and pull up a loop. Insert your hook underneath the next vertical bar, pull up a loop. Find the next vertical bar, and pull up a loop. So we have 4 loops on our hook. We're stopping at this point because this is a short row. We're not going to work that last stitch. Once you have your 4 loops, you know when you work in a short row that you're ready to do your return pass now. So tool over and pull through 2 loops at a time until you have 1 loop remaining on your hook. Okay, that completes that return pass for the short row. Okay, and the next forward pass is going to be for a regular full row. And insert your hook underneath the first vertical bar, which is not the edge stitch, it's the one after it. Tool over, pull up a loop. Insert your hook underneath the next one, pull up a loop. And the next vertical bar is down here in the previous row. You don't actually insert your hook here. That's actually part of the vertical bar here. So you want to make sure that when you're doing this, you're not inserting your hook here. You're inserting it into the vertical bar. And you can tell that it's not a vertical bar because it kind of drops off, it slants down into that vertical bar in the previous row. So you can see how there's that vertical bar. It looks like it's right connecting to that edge. So when that stitch drops off here on this row, that's where your vertical bar is. It looks like it's coming right out of that edge right there, that stitch. So I just want to make sure that you know not to work into that stitch. That's not the vertical bar. That's actually part of the horizontal bars that's in between here. Okay, so now we're going to insert our hook into this vertical bar in the previous row and pull up a loop. And then find your vertical bar, next vertical bar. It's actually in the previous row. And pull up a loop. That was the one we left unworked when we did the short row. So then insert your hook into that vertical bar, pull up a loop, and insert your hook into the center of the magic ring, pull up a loop, and then you'll have 6 loops on your hook. If you have 7 loops or 5 loops, then you know you made a mistake because you're supposed to have 6. So it's just good to remember to have 6 loops. Then do your return pass. So tool over and pull through 2 loops. Tool over, pull through 2. We're pulling through 2 loops at a time until we have 1 loop remaining on our hook. Okay, so that's what it looks like so far. We're getting there. So this forward pass is going to be for a short row. So we're going to insert a hook underneath this first vertical bar. Remember, we're not counting the edge. We're not working under the stitches on the edge. Find your next vertical bar, insert your hook underneath it, tool over, pull up a loop. Find your next vertical bar, insert your hook underneath it, tool over, pull that underneath the vertical bar to pull up a loop. Leave the loop on the hook, and then leave the loop on the hook. Find your next vertical bar, insert your hook underneath it, tool over, pull up a loop, and then you'll have 4 loops on your hook. Remember, when we do a short row, we work a forward pass until we have 4 loops on our hook. Then we stop, and then we do our return pass. So this last vertical bar here, we don't work that one. We're going to stop short of finishing the row. We have 4 loops on our hook. Now we're going to do our return pass. So tool over and pull through 2 loops at a time. Tool over, pull through 2. Tool over, pull through 2. And that completes our return pass for our short row. Okay, so now we're going to do a forward pass. This forward pass will be a complete row. So we'll be picking up 5 stitches, plus we'll pick up a stitch from the center of the magic ring. So when we finish the forward pass, we'll have 6 loops on our hook, then we'll do the return pass. Okay, so find your first vertical bar, insert your hook underneath it, tool over and pull up a loop. Find your next vertical bar, insert your hook underneath it, tool over and pull up a loop. And now we have 3 loops on our hook, so now we know to look for that next vertical bar that's down here in the previous row. So you drop your hook down here and grab this vertical bar. So if you look, you can see this stitch kind of looks like it slants down, drops off. The row just drops off. That's where your vertical bar is at the end. It's right down here. So you can see that it's into the previous row. So insert your hook underneath that vertical bar. Tool over and pull up a loop. And then work the next vertical bar after that one. Pull up a loop. Alright, so insert your hook into the center of the magic ring. Tool over and pull up a loop. And leave the loop on the hook, and you'll see you have 6 loops on your hook. So now we're going to do our return pass. We're going to yarn. We're going to tool over and pull through 2 loops at a time until we have 1 loop remaining on our hook. So now the next forward pass will be a short row. So we're going to insert our hook underneath the first vertical bar. not the edge stitch. Tulle over, pull up a loop, find your next vertical bar, pull up a loop, find your next one, pull up a loop. Okay, we have 4 loops on our hook. So we're not going to work that last one here. We're going to stop short of finishing the row. We have 4 loops, and now we know to do our return pass. Because when we work the short rows, we have 4 loops. So now tulle over and pull through 2 loops at a time until you have 1 loop remaining on your hook. So that was the short row. So now we need to do a forward pass and one from the magic ring. Okay, so now we're going to do a forward pass. We'll be picking up the 5 loops plus 1 more because we're inserting it into the magic ring. And that's why when we do the return pass, since we're working into the center of the magic ring, we're going to be doing tulle over and pulling through 2 to begin the return pass. Like normally if you're working with Tunisian Simple Stitches and you're working like a square swatch, you would pull through 1 to chain up and then through 2. But since we're working into a magic ring, that's why when we do our return pass, we need to pull through 2 because we want it to curve around. So we want it to become like a circle. So that's why we need to pull through 2 and not just 1. Okay, so now we're going to insert a hook underneath this first. We're going to insert a hook underneath the first vertical bar, pull up a loop, find your next vertical bar, pull up a loop, and then you see you have 3 loops on your hook. So your row kind of ends here. So we're going to be picking up the vertical bar that's part of the previous row. Insert your hook underneath that one, pull up a loop, insert your hook underneath the next vertical bar, pull up a loop. We have 5 loops, so now we need to insert our hook into the center of the magic ring, tulle over and pull up a loop. So now you should have 6 loops on your hook. So we're going to tulle over and pull through 2 loops at a time until we have 1 loop remaining on our hook. We have 19 rows done so far. So we need to do 4 more rows. So now the next row is going to be a short row. So we're not working into the first vertical bar, which is the edge. We find the next vertical bar, insert a hook underneath it, tulle over and pull up a loop. Insert your hook underneath the next vertical bar, tulle over, pull up a loop. Insert your hook underneath the next one, and pull up a loop. So now we have 4 loops on our hook. Since this is a short row, we're going to stop here. So when you have your 4 loops for a short row, that's when you do your return pass. Tulle over and pull through 2 loops at a time until you have 1 loop remaining on the hook. That completes your return pass for your short row. So now the next row, we're going to pick up 5 stitches under the vertical bars and then 1 underneath. So for the full forward pass now, so now the next forward pass is going to be a full row. We're going to be picking up 2 stitches from this short row and then picking up another loop from this one down in the previous row and then another one here. So we'll have 5 loops and then we'll pick up another stitch through the magic ring. So we'll have 6 loops when we do this forward pass. Okay, so now each forward pass and each return pass you can see is the same. So we're just repeating all the way around, alternating between a full row and a short row. Full and then short. So it's the same way each time. It's just, but it is the same thing over and over again. So, but I just wanted to make sure I did every single stitch to show you how to do the entire dish scrubby. That's why I'm not skipping ahead or anything and saying just keep repeating it over and over again. But essentially that's what we're doing. Each short row is done the same way. Each full row is done the same way. But I just wanted to make sure I show you how to do the entire thing in case you want to crochet along to make the dish scrubby. I didn't want to skip ahead because, Tunisian crochet, a lot of people might be new to Tunisian crochet. I just wanted to make it easier for you by doing every single stitch and completing the scrubby. Alright, so now this first vertical bar, remember we don't work underneath the first vertical bar that's on the edge. We find the next vertical bar, pull up a loop, and then tool over and pull up a loop. Find your next vertical bar, insert your hook underneath it, tool over and pull up a loop. And then you see, because this was a short row, it kind of looks like it drops off here. So right there, if you follow that down, then you can see the vertical bar in the previous row. We're inserting a hook underneath that vertical bar from the previous row. We're going to pick up a loop, so we're going to tool over and pull up a loop. And then you find your next vertical bar. It's after that one. Tool over and pull up a loop. We have 5 loops on our hook now. So now we're going to insert a hook into the center of the magic ring, tool over and pull up a loop. So now you should have 6 loops on your hook at this point. So now you're going to tool over and pull through 2 loops at a time until you have 1 loop remaining on the hook. So we just tooled over and pulled through 2, tool over, pull through 2, pull through 2, 2, 2. Okay, so this is what it looks like so far, and you can really see how it's starting to curve around like a circle. And then when we pull the magic ring, that will close up that center circle. And then you can see these two are not going to be connected. That's why we needed to leave this tail here, because we're going to seam that together afterwards. So as we do more rows, it will get closer and closer together where these will meet, so that we can seam them together to make our circle. And the reason why I wanted to leave the tail for the magic ring there and make a good sized tail, so when we seam it together, we're going to work up this way, and we're not going to fasten this off. I'll leave this connected because I wanted to leave it connected because when we're done, we're going to work one more round to have this edge, because we're going to work one more round to make a decorative edging. Okay, and of course there's different edges you can do. It's just a matter of preference. This one was just a slip stitch, chain 1, slip stitch, chain 1, slip stitch. I did that all the way around. So every single stitch has a slip stitch with a chain 1 in between. So that's how I did this edge. So this is really easy to do. But you definitely want to do something on around the edges because it makes it look nice and finished off. And of course you can make these double thick too if you want. You can make 2 of them and then sew them together. You can do, each side could be a different color. That'd be pretty too. Okay, so that was a full row. So our next forward pass is going to be for a short row. So that means we'll have 4 loops on our hook, then we'll do our return pass. Okay, so we're going to insert a hook underneath the first vertical bar, not the one that's on the edge. So find your next one, first vertical bar that's after the edge, then tool over and pull up a loop. Find your next vertical bar, insert your hook underneath it, pull up a loop. Find your next vertical bar and pull up a loop. So we're going to stop here. We're not going to work that last vertical bar. You should have 4 loops on your hook. And now we're going to do our return pass for our short row. So we're going to tool over and pull through 2 loops at a time until we have 1 loop remaining on our hook. So now we've completed the return pass for the short row. So this next forward pass, we're going to work a full row. But when we complete this forward pass for the full row, we'll have 6 loops on our hook. Okay, so we're going to find the first vertical bar after the edge, insert our hook underneath it, pull up a loop, find your next vertical bar, tool over, pull up a loop, because you can see that this stitch kind of drops off, the row just kind of ends and drops off. And then you just follow that down to find your vertical bar. And then you just follow that down to find the vertical bar that's in the previous row. So you're going to insert your hook down into that vertical bar that's in the previous row. Insert your hook underneath it, tool over and pull up a loop. And then find your next vertical bar, tool over and pull up a loop. And then you're going to insert your hook into the center of the magic ring, yarn over or tool over, and pull up a loop. Now you see you have 6 loops on your hook. You're going to tool over and pull through 2 loops at a time until you have 1 loop remaining on your hook. Okay, so that completes the return pass for that full row. So now that we did a full row, we know the next one is going to be a short row, then a full, then short, then full, and you just do that all the way around until you have 23 rows. And if you lose track of where you are, you can always turn it to the edge, and it's really easy to count the rows with Tunisian crochet because you can just find the V stitches along the edge and just count the V's. 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 20, 21, 22, 23. There's my 23 rows. Now it looks like it's not connected, but when you pull the magic ring, it will be. So now I'm finished with the rows. So I ended on a full row here. Okay? So I ended on a full row, not on a short row. Okay, so now all we need to do is go ahead and pull the tail of the magic ring to close up the center circle. I'm going to go ahead and remove the hook, but I'm going to pull up a loop so that it doesn't unravel on me, because I'm not going to fasten off here with the working yarn, with a working tool. The reason being is I am going to do another round for the edging with this still connected. First, we need to pull the tail of the magic ring, and then we need to seam these two rows together. Right now it doesn't look like the sides are going to meet. Now when you pull the magic ring, it will pull them together. Let me go ahead and pull that closed, and then you can see how now the rows meet, just like that. So now we're going to use the tail of the magic ring to seam the two rows together, and I'm going to show you how to do that because we want to try to make the seam invisible and not very noticeable. So I'm going to show you how to do that. So we're going to leave the working tool that's connected to the spool. We're not going to fasten off because we're going to use that. We're just going to use the tail of the magic ring to seam the rows together. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over, and I'm going to go ahead and pull the tail tight to get that hole in the center as small as I can. And then I'm going to use a darning needle, and I'm going to insert that through. Okay, so now I'm going to go ahead and pull that tail to the front because we are going to seam it from the front. And there's a reason why you want to do it on the front, because what we're going to do is, you find, if you look at the dish scrubby, and you can see these bars here that we worked around. These are the vertical bars. What we're going to do is we want to try to match up this vertical bar to this one to this one, and that way we're going to match up the vertical bars when we seam them together, so that way it'll pull it closed. It'll hide this seam here where you see those little V stitches where we begin the first row. You see the V stitches from when we began the first row? That's going to hide that underneath, and then it's going to pull the vertical bars together, so you kind of match it up with these vertical bars, because you can see how they all seem to line up in a circle. This is the first one, the second bars. You see how these vertical bars all kind of line up? That's what we're going to do, is we're going to seam them together to pull these vertical bars together. When we seam them together, we're going to pull the vertical bars together so they match up real nice. So I'm going to show you how to do that. Okay, so you need to find the first vertical bar on this side. That's here. Here's the second, third, fourth. So you can see we want to find the vertical bars on this side. So let's point them out to you. I'm going to point them out to you first so you know what you're looking for. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4. And then that's that edge stitch. And then you come to this side, and that's that one right there. 1, 2, 3, 4, and here's the edge. So we are going to pull this one together with this one and match this to this one. We're going to match the third one here to this, and then the fourth one to this one. And that's the edge right here. You can see we're going to just kind of line them up. And you can see how the circles kind of match up if you follow the bars. You see how the circles all match up. This is where the seam is here. and I pull them all together so that the circle continues. You see how that all continues like that? That's what the goal is. So let me show you how. So here's the first one. We're gonna go ahead and insert the darning needle underneath that first vertical bar, starting from the center where the magic ring was. And we're going to pull that up through that one. And then you're going to find the matching one over here. Now remember, there's 4 of them before the edge. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4. So this one's a little bit small, so you might miss it. So that's why I wanted to mention there are 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, then the edge. So you insert it underneath that one. So now we're going to go and find this one, insert it from the center, and we're going to stitch it upward to pull those 2 bars together, just like that. Okay, and then we're going to find the next vertical bar, which is here. Okay, so we're going to insert it underneath, working from the center where the magic ring was up towards the edge, and pull that one up through, and then find the vertical bar that matches that. It's right here, and pull it up, pull that seam together, and see how it's lining those vertical bars up together like that, and it's hiding those V-stitches from when we began. It's going to cover that up and hide that seam. Okay, so now we find the next pair of vertical bars to work under. Here's the next one. We're going to insert it here. So this is the next one, which is the third one we're working now. And then find the one on this side, just right here. Insert it underneath, and then seam it together to pull those together, to line them up. See how it's lining up? And then there's one more. It's right here. There's one more before the edge. Insert it underneath. We're going to insert our darning needle underneath, pull that through, and then find the one that's on the other side that matches up. That's the last one here, right before the edge stitch. Insert your darning needle right underneath on that side, pull up through that stitch, and see how it pulls it together real nicely there, and it's hiding that edge. See how they're matching up perfectly there. Alright, then here, now what we're going to do is we can work our edge. So now what we're going to do here, so now we're done pulling the stitches together here to seam it up. So now what we're going to do is we're going to insert our hook underneath that first stitch at the edge, and we're going to pull that through and join with a slip stitch. So now we can just weave this in to hide the tail. So I'm not going to cut the top yarn here. I'm not going to fasten off just yet with the working tool because we're going to work an edge all the way around. So I'm going to go ahead and take the hook out. I'm going to pull up a loop on my edge here from the working yarn so it doesn't unravel. And I'm going to go ahead and weave this in now, so that way you can see what I'm doing when I work the edge. So see how it really seamed those edges, those rows together? So you can see how nicely that seamed the edges together and pulls the vertical bars to line up in the circle when you work, working up to match the vertical bars to seam it. So it works very nicely that way. And then if you do it that way, then you can see you really can't see where the seam was. It really hides it really nicely. So it looks really nice and tidy. Now you can go ahead and make 2 of these rounds and then connect them together to make a double-sided dish scrubby if you want. Okay, so I'm just going to go ahead and weave this in. And I like to just go ahead and put it to the back and weave it in the back. I'm going to weave it around the back instead of the front. So I'm just going to weave it through to hide the tail. That I have that woven in, I'm going to cut the tail from the magic ring. Trim that. So now I have the tail that I just used to seam the rows together. I went ahead and moved that in, trimmed that off, and I still have the working tool still connected because now we're going to do an edge all the way around. This is just going to be regular crochet to do the edging. Okay, so we joined with the slip stitch. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to chain one, and then into the next stitch I'm going to do a slip stitch, and then chain one, and then a slip stitch into the next stitch, and then chain one, and then a slip stitch into the next stitch. And I'm going to do that all the way around. So I'm just going to chain one and slip stitch into every single stitch. And you can do, any type of edging that you want. So it's just a really easy edging to do. It just gives it a nice finished look when you're done. And that's how it will look. Real easy edging, and it looks really nice. Just makes it look a lot nicer and neater. So with this one, you can see I just worked my tension a little bit looser than this one, so you can see it will look like this. Or you can even change the hook size to the next size up if you want, because if you do the same tension here, then you can see how the decorative edge will look. I'm just working my tension a little bit looser, so this is how it will look. Slip stitch, chain one, slip stitch, chain one, chain one, and then join with a slip stitch to the first one that we did. And that, I want to leave a little bit of a tail so I can weave it in. Now I'm going to go ahead and tool over, pull that through, give it a tug to fasten off, and then all that's left to do is to weave in that tail. And then I'm going to just go ahead and pull that through to the back and finish weaving it in. Now we have finished making our Tunisian Simple Stitch round dish scrubby. I hope that you enjoyed the tutorial today on how to make this round Tunisian dish scrubby. And I want to thank you for watching today, and have a great day.